If you are an egoist in a world like that, where there are sheep and there are wolves, what's most important about the wolf in sheep's clothing? What must he not do? Someone tell me. Can't hear you.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. What must a wolf in sheep's clothing not do in this scenario?
Tell everyone that he's a wolf.
That's exactly right. He has to be sneaky. He has to be sharp. He has to be smart. And that means most of the time he keeps himself fully clothed in sheep's clothing. It's only when it's beneficial for him to reveal himself as the wolf, and he can get away with it, that he does so. Does that make sense?
You should play Among Us. This is kind of what you're describing. You gotta like hide and you gotta murder people and you gotta like run away. Yeah.
That would be a game.
It's kind of like Machiavellianism, but for the average person rather than for simply the prince. How many of you in government talked about Machiavelli? Okay. All right, so just to give you a little bit of background, Machiavelli was an Italian guy who was good friends with the Medici family. The Medici were a powerful ruling class in family in Florence, Italy, back in the 1400s. And he wrote a book for them. And in it, he describes the good prince who pretends to take religion seriously. Yes, he goes to the church and he says all the stuff that the people expect him to say. Yes, he participates in all the religious rites. Yes, he kisses the babies and looks like he cares for his community. Yes, he even visits the poor sometimes. But behind the scenes, he is all about being cutthroat and achieving the most power possible. That is how you need to be in everyday life. You need to be like the Machiavellian prince. Let's face it, there's a lot of people in our country who are already that way. Joe Biden, Donald Trump come to mind. Most politicians, actually. Maybe even your pastor. And so let's basically back up from that argument and ask ourselves a different question. And so the question might be something along the lines of, if you want to be an egoist and you want to embrace selfishness, how would it make sense that someone like Ayn Rand argues in favor of selfishness, in favor of egoism, not just egoism for herself, but egoism to be universalized? How can she make that argument when it's so clear that from the argument I just made that the wolf has to keep hidden? The wolf has to be hidden in the sheep's clothing in order for it to work. What is she thinking? That's the question. And I'm going to basically ask the question and see if you guys can come up with why she is able to argue what she argues. There's really two possibilities here. I'll entertain either of those two possibilities, why she can argue what she argues. Anybody? Ian.
Well, as far as I can remember, she asserts that selfishness is imperative to the survival and the, I guess, furthering of human society. So if humans are not inherently selfish, which they themselves already know that they are selfish and everyone else is selfish, so therefore, why should it be hidden?
Yeah, well, you're on the right track, but I think that so that would be on the actually more complicated of the two things. So I'll just give you the two reasons. The first reason could be that, look, she's come up with a way to make herself rich and famous by arguing for this, so she does. And yeah, there are some people who are going to judge her for it, but in the long run, it's still better for her, right? So she can argue for selfishness, even though it's not really universally viable. Does that make sense? That's one possibility as to how it makes sense that she could argue for selfishness. The other one is what Ian was hinting at. And what Ian was hinting at was the idea that selfishness is something that not only all human beings have as an inherent part of their being, but it's selfishness understood in a way that is not the Calvinist Christian understanding of human nature and the selfishness tied to human nature. So I'm going to share my screen with you guys now at this point. We're going to look at Ayn Rand's basic understanding of human nature. And so really it does come down to the idea that human nature is, now can you guys see the screen? Can you see the Rand's basic beliefs? Okay. Really comes down to the idea that selfishness is not equated to evil behavior or brutish behavior. And what we have to do in order to understand what Ayn Rand is arguing in favor of is we have to talk about the nature of humanity itself. And this is something that you guys need to ask yourselves. What do you believe is true about people, human beings? Do you believe that human beings are mostly selfish? Let me see your hands. If you say, yeah, human beings are mostly selfish. Okay. Do you believe that human beings are, in addition to being mostly selfish, are antisocial, or are they more social animals? How many of you think human beings are antisocial? They don't like other people. Aha, so you see the discussion there that we had last time about the state of nature where life is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Doesn't work, does it? If you put the little VCR cassette into the rewinder and you rewind human time all the way back to the beginning, you don't find a state of nature where people are running around bashing each other's heads with rocks, do you? What do you find? Can you even get there without some sort of society? Hello? In order to actually produce children, I'm not going to explain the biology of it here, right? You can't run around in the woods all by yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Additionally, what we see when we do anthropological work is we find that there were human societies, and it could be that the male-female relationship and the raising of children is so inherent to human nature that across all societies, going back to the earliest times of humankind, guess what we find? We do not find males and females only, like males raping females and running off, and that's how it is. That's not what we find. What we find is what?
Relationships?
We see family relationships, yep. So there isn't a state of nature, right? There is no place where you're running around in the woods. Instead, what you have is a family. You have cooperation by nature within families. And yes, that cooperation can be for selfish reasons. The wife gets something out of it, the husband gets something out of it, and the kid gets something out of it, right? Does that make sense? And so yes, there can be selfishness there, but that does not mean that it's a destructive or antisocial relationship. It could be that these relationships are by nature social, they are by nature helpful, they are by nature even creative, but they're definitely not evil or brutish. And so let's look at Ayn Rand's basic beliefs here. Humans, yes, are mostly selfish, and that is fine. But just because they're selfish does not mean that that's evil, right? Does not mean that because someone is selfish, that they must therefore want to kill everybody. No, it could be that human beings are selfish, but they're willing to cooperate very happily with others because they are social beings. Most human beings are naturally creative and naturally constructive, but they are the most that way for selfish purposes. And so I have a question for you guys. What is true for you look within yourselves and ask yourselves, what do you think of? And that's, the older I've gotten, the more I realize that there are some parts to my own makeup that I cannot divest myself of. And you may not be this way. And I asked my last class this, and I was absolutely astounded at the fact that nobody joined in and said, yeah, I'm that way too. But we'll see. I cannot stop myself from thinking about the creation of things, of my creating things. I don't know about yourself, and this could be a variety of different things, and it probably has something to do with what you're interested in. But I'm interested in, of all things, architecture. I'm interested in not just like literal architecture, but also the architecture of societies, the architecture and the building of various functional models. And I'm also very interested in architecture in terms of physical reality. And so I can't keep myself from building stuff. Over the course of this last summer, I built a fairly large pole barn almost completely by myself. I designed it specifically, and I put a lot of thought into designing it specifically in a way where I could build the entire thing by myself. And that was a lot of extra work going into that design. Couldn't stop thinking about building this thing. Like it consumes me when I'm thinking about building things. And yes, for myself, it wasn't, I didn't go on my neighbor's property and build them a barn for fun. I built one for myself, right? For my family. And so it's something that I think about. I built bridges across my creek. And my wife makes fun of me for wanting to spend time and money on building a bridge across our creek it's going to be a covered bridge. But I can't help it. Like, that's just what I want to do. I can't turn it off. Like, I cannot turn it off. I cannot not be creative and build and want to build stuff. I will probably, even when I'm a crippled old man and I can't see and I've lost my sight, I will still be building things in my mind. That's just who I am. I don't want to destroy anything. I want to build. Is that the case for you guys? And of course, it could be other things. Like, it doesn't have to be architecture. It can be, I want to build a piece of music. Like, I want to create music. I can't help it. I want to write songs. Or maybe it's, I want to paint something. I can't help some. Or maybe it's like, I want to build a world within the computer and build video games or whatever. Like, there's a whole different variety of things that we as human beings are interested in. How many of you do have a fairly strong creative impulse? Let me see your hands. Okay. And some of you might be like, no. And this is also true for some people. Some people, and this is the question, like, what motivates you? What motivates you to do things? Is it the desire to be entertained? I think that is a fairly strong desire that we have. This is why we can turn on The Mandalorian and enjoy it fully. You're not really learning anything new. You're not building anything new, but there is a certain thrill there in being entertained. By the way, anyone see the 2 new episodes of The Mandalorian? I'm talking to mostly girls here.
Sorry, what was the question again?
You watched the new episodes of The Mandalorian on Disney Plus.
Oh, yes, sir.
Yes, we've got one. Yeah, good stuff, huh? Did you like the spiders?
Oh, no, I'm not a spider fan.
That was crazy. Creepy. Okay, anyway, and so ask yourself this about human nature. Are humans naturally constructive and social, or are they destructive and antisocial? Or to put it slightly differently, are humans by nature sinful? Are they unclean? Are they evil? Or are human beings more positive than that kind of Calvinistic Christian understanding? Ayn Rand believes not in the Christian Calvinist understanding of human nature at all. She does not think that just because you are selfish, you are evil. She doesn't think that selfishness leads to evil behavior. She believes that you can be selfish and be very constructive. In fact, most people that have built successful businesses are exactly that way. Bill Gates, Phil Knight, Who's the guy who did Apple? What's his name? Steve Jobs. Yes, Steve Jobs. These guys, yeah, they were very creative, but they were creative for who? The good of society? Or do you think they enriched themselves along the way? You can bet they enrich themselves along the way. And so the idea is this: if we are, as human beings, sorry, it's probably the COVID. Got to get off that stuff. If we are a society that of human beings that are generally creative but also selfish, let's not demonize that selfish motivation that's behind our creativity. And that's okay. We can create systems based upon that selfishness. In fact, the most successful economic system that has ever been tried by humanity is one that is based entirely on the motive of what? Greed. That's called capitalism. And there's been no other economic system that has been better for humanity than capitalism. Now you might say, yeah, I'm a Democrat. Okay, AOC, calm down. In fact, AOC, you're too ideological, just leave. Let's look at the facts. The facts are both socialism and capitalism has been tried. Capitalism is far more successful at creating wealth for large swaths of people, including people on the lower parts of society, than socialism has ever been. Socialism has been tried a bunch of times, and capitalism has been too, and it's, you know, the jury is in. Capitalism is more successful, and it's based on what? Greed, selfishness, and that's okay. And so let's build more systems like capitalism that embrace human selfishness and is skeptical of things like altruism. So let's move away from a society of guilt-ridden, unhappy, cynical people. And we all have seen the beauty pageant. I hate to say I haven't watched any beauty pageants. It looks pretty terrible. But I have seen some clips of some of those girls saying pretty hilarious things like, I just want so badly to inspire the girls in Georgia and in other countries like Europe and England and other countries like Africa. And you're like, wow, you're an idiot. And you don't believe a word that you're saying. How many of you have ever seen stuff like that? Or you see someone like the great TV preacher who famously, when COVID first came out, cursed COVID on TV and then blew on it. Remember that? COVID-19. Watch the Kenneth Copeland remix of COVID-19. It's funny. He blows on the COVID. I blow the breath of God on you. Give me your money. And you watch that guy and you're like, yeah, I'm cynical because that guy is, you know, he's stealing from kind of poor, dumb Christians. And that's just kind of the reality. And then when we ourselves act selfishly and not for the good of others, then we feel guilty. Guys, we have a cynical, guilt-ridden society. Why? Because of altruism. Let's flush altruism down the toilet. Let's embrace selfishness as good. I'm not talking about like mass murder. I'm not talking about, you know, doing away with society. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about being good capitalists. How does that sound to you? Does that sound like nice, like I'm a friendly Republican now?
Mr. Cook, are you talking about the rock remix or the metal remix? Which remix?
I don't know. It's just Kenneth Copeland, COVID-19.
It says Wind of God.
That might be the one, the Wind of God. It's really a classic, the Wind of God, the COVID-19. Yeah, good stuff. Actually, it's really, really funny. And last year in my Christian history class. I opened one week, so if you took my Christian history class last spring and you actually watched any of the videos, I put a video of Kenneth Copeland blowing the wind of God on COVID. It was pretty entertaining. Okay, so since we are naturally selfish, let's create a society that is okay with our selfishness and create systems like capitalism, where not only does the individual benefit, but we all benefit. And let's look at the Declaration of Independence itself. America is based on the idea that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these rights are the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Guys, what's wrong with the pursuit of happiness? Nothing. Do it. Okay. Any questions about that? And so we have really two different types of egoism, and two different worlds where egoism is embraced. And it depends entirely upon what is true about human nature. So I want you guys to ask yourself, what is true about human nature? Are we naturally constructive? Are we naturally creative? Are we naturally social? Or are we naturally selfish and destructive? Does our selfishness lead to destruction? Does our selfishness lead to things like antisocial behavior? Depending on how your understanding of your understanding of humanity and our human nature is, you can have two different types of egoism in practice emerging. Ethical egoism. The case of one, it's Ayn Rand's world, where we are all basically creative and social beings, but we put systems in place that are okay with selfishness, and life goes on. The other is, look, if you fully embrace selfishness, you're going to take it all the way to, which means that if you have to kill someone to get ahead, then you will, if you can get away with it. Means that if you have to rob, steal, and be thieving, you will do so. That human beings are by nature kind of nasty. And if that's the case, then as an egoist, you are encouraged to be a wolf in sheep's clothing. Very rarely letting your wolfiness show from underneath the clothing of the sheep. So which do you think it is if you're going to embrace egoism? Is it you are the wolf in sheep's clothing, or is it the, it's like capitalism, it's all going to work out?
It's like capitalism, it's all going to work out.
Okay, so Emily thinks that people are creative and probably naturally constructive. Anybody else? What do you think? Because frankly, if Ayn Rand's ideas are workable, like Emily seems to think, then maybe we should be egoists. Anybody else? Sophie, what do you think? Are we naturally good, constructive, or are we naturally antisocial and destructive?
Well, I want to pick and choose, but I can't. So I'm going to say because we do want community, but we're destructive.
So you say that the motives are generally mixed. Maybe it goes a little bit of both ways?
Generally, our motives just naturally are typically selfish.
Well, yeah, we're not arguing against selfishness. We're arguing against whether, because yes, we are. Are human beings so naturally good and kind and creative and community oriented, or are humans antisocial, destructive, nasty, that sort of thing?
I'm going to go with the kind community.
Okay, so maybe egoism will work. Ian.
But regardless of whether humans are constructive or destructive by nature, someone who has already, like someone, say Steve Jobs, someone like that already understands that the best way to further their own desire or selfish means or whatever is to do it through a constructive system, because we already have proof that the other system does not work. So regardless of whether they want to do it or not in that fashion, they would have to understand that that's the best way to do it, and it would be stupid to do it anyway else.
Well, yeah, but that's if all things were equal. If Steve Jobs and Joe Schmo down the road have exactly the same talents, but it could be that for some individuals that lack the same talents as Steve Jobs, that for them to actually benefit themselves, they're not going to be successful in business. They don't have the wherewithal to do it. And then for them, it might make more sense for them to like look into bank robbing. I mean, it is possible to come up to conceive someone who is probably a better bank robber than they are a businessman. So what do you do in a situation like that?
That's just Darwinian natural selection.
Well, unless you're a really good bank robber, in which case you get away with it.
That's true, but using bank robbing as a means to gain wealth is still massively less efficient than running a business, no matter how good or bad you are at either of the two.
I would disagree. I think that it depends on your access to and the specific situation, but you could come up, I think, fairly easily with a situation where someone is much more likely, now, of course, let's not say bank robbing, let's say money laundering or something like that, where the chance of getting away with it is more likely than bank robbing. But you could definitely come up with a dishonest way for someone to make a lot of money. Than they would in any business venture. You know, especially, you know, I don't want to pick on anyone right now, but supposing there was a certain politician who might be heading towards the White House whose son has a lot of business connections because of his last name and gets paid an awful lot of money for influencing American politics in favor of those various businesses overseas. Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden's an idiot. Okay, he is. He does all kind of drugs, and he's going to make a lot better money doing illegal or semi-illegal things with things like the Chinese government and the Ukrainian government than he is going to be starting a software company. You know what I'm saying, Ian? Like, you can come up with people who have limited abilities, but because of their situation, because if you happen to be the son of the vice president, you're put in positions where you can, accomplish things that are, well, shady.
I would agree, but I don't think when you say that people's motivations are, or sorry, let me go back to the notes that I took. When you say that if we are all naturally selfish, so that humanity should design a system to take advantage of said selfishness, are you limiting, or are you saying that the scope of the system, like say capitalism, is bound by the entirety of humanity or just by individual societies? Because if it's the latter, then I would say that Hunter Biden, or the nameless subject from your example, would still be using a constructive method. It may just not be benefiting humanity as a whole.
Well, potentially. But then again, these things could ultimately benefit, you know, some people rather than others. And this is basically the main reason why in a capitalist society, or really in any society, we have to put in place rules to keep people from doing what is in their best. And this is by the way, why we have laws, which suggest that you can't unduly use your influence if you happen to have certain influence in ways that are negative, that are not beneficial for for our country. Things like insider trading, for instance, would be another good example. Why insider trading is illegal, because some people will do it and it will benefit them, but that's not necessarily good. It's not fair to the other investors. And so the entire reason, so Ayn Rand would say we have capitalism because it's good for the individual, but we also can put in place rules to make things more fair across the board for everyone. So that's the idea, that we put in place social safeguards that punish the people who do things that hurt society too much. And so there is a potential there is a conflict there, though, if you say to the individual, yeah, you should always be selfish. And so which predominates? And frankly, I'll give you my view. I think it's a mix. I think it's a mix of constructive and destructive. I think both those urges are deeply embedded in humanity, to be constructive and also to be destructive, to be social and to be antisocial, to be, frankly, even selfish, and sometimes to be not selfish, though I think selfishness probably predominates. But once again, depending on which you think predominates, and this is why there's probably some fuzziness here, how far would you be willing to go as a true egoist? So if you were in Hunter Biden's position, would you go to the point where, yeah, you'd sell out your country? And I'm not saying you did at all, don't get me wrong, but if it benefited him greatly to sell out his country, is that the right thing for Hunter Biden to do? Now, Ian, you might say it'd be better if he went and started a software business. He's not smart enough to. He could be a lot better off personally by selling out his country. Should he?
Well, it depends on, well, I guess according to the egoist, it would depend on whether he views the risk of selling out his country as less than the reward that he would be receiving.
Yeah, so right there, you're falling into the second category, rather than thinking that, like Ayn Rand would say, that humans are not naturally this way. But is he willing to take that so far? And then do we really want to go there as a society? And this is where you'd say that someone like Hunter Biden would want to be the wolf in sheep's clothing, right? Want to pretend like he's on the up and up, and then deep down probably not be. And so, Ian, if it was actually in his best interest to sell out his country, should he?
Are you asking me, or are you asking the egoist?
I'm asking the egoist.
So this question really just has two answers, both of which we've already talked about in class, right? It's either you say yes and you prescribe to the theory that everyone should, or anyone successful is a wolf in sheep's clothing, or you say no and you subscribe to Ayn Rand's theory of a selfish society for the benefit of humanity.
Yeah, you're right. And so what Ayn Rand would say, you just have to have rules in place to make sure that it's not in Hunter Biden's best interest to sell out his country. Does that make sense? That's what she means by putting systems in place. Most people wouldn't, but for those who would, let's have these rules in place. And that's what she wants to create. And so what do you guys think? Should we be egoists? Can you at least see Ayn Rand's argument? How many of you say, yep, I can see your argument?
Like, I can see it, but I don't agree with it 100%, because you can still, it's just going to go in a circle, because you can be an egoist but still care about people because it's in your best interest. So yeah.
Well, and yeah, she would say that's fine. You can care for people, but just be careful that you don't let your caring for other people get too much in the way of your own selfishness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's look at Rachel's case against psychological egoism here really quickly. We're almost done with class, but let's look at this really, really quickly. I mentioned and summarized this a little bit last time. I think it's still useful for us to talk about. Rachel's argues against psychological egoism first, rather than ethical egoism. You will be reading his argument, James Rachel's argument, against ethical egoism in the course pack. So I'm only going to have you read half of the article in the course pack. And also keep in mind that though it's due next Thursday, or this coming Thursday, If I'm not here, then you'll just have to wait and take that quiz later. So be ready for it on Thursday. The second half of the James Rachel's article in the course back on Thursday. But be forewarned that if I'm not here, that'll be pushed back to the following Monday. Okay, so a week from today, if I don't show up on this Thursday. As you know, my wife is on the verge of having a baby. And babies can happen, turns out, anytime. And they do not stick to the rules. So be ready for that. But we'll look at the first part of the article right here. Rachel says, asking the question, do you do what you want to do, is the wrong question. Rather than ask that question, let's ask the question, what do you want to do? And I made the argument, if you remember, that everything you did from the time you woke up in the morning to the time you went to bed at night was always and only for selfish reasons. And the reasoning usually goes something along the lines of this for the psychological egoist. I want to feel good, so I will give to starving children because that will make me feel good. Okay, let me just say here really quickly, and this is me as an Ayn Rand egoist. This is me as a more James Robinson egoist who's like, yeah, when you realize that life is your toy box, basically, that guy. By the way, I prefer that understanding of egoism to Ayn Rand's. I think Ayn Rand maybe has a little bit of merit, but the other one I think is a lot more consistent intellectually. The first article we read by Robinson, I think, is more consistent than Ayn Rand's. Regardless, you have to have some sort of motive behind wanting to feel good. I mean, after all, if you were a true egoist, would you really care about starving children? Why would giving to starving children make you feel good? It wouldn't. And so you have to have a desire behind the feelings that you have. I care for others. I have an unmet desire to see the poor helped. Yeah, it's true, you want to feel good. I'll give to starving children. It makes me feel good. Now, even if this is your reasoning, it's a question of desires. What do you want to do? You see the little old lady trying to go across the road. What do you want to do? Do you desire to help that little old lady? And then when you do, yes, you'd feel good. Or do you have the desire to steal her purse and push her into the road while the garbage truck is coming down the road and have her get smushed? What do you want to do? That's the question. What is your desire? If you desire to help the little old lady, you're kind. If you desire to steal her purse and to push her into the road, you're a sick individual. And so it is a question of desires. Caring and doing for others is kindness. And this is, ladies and gentlemen, a motive for some people. So ask yourself the question, what motivates you? What are your desires? Do you desire to see other people helped? Let me see your hands here. How many of you say, yeah, sometimes I maybe not all the time, but sometimes I do desire to see other people helped. When I see a hungry child on TV or something and someone comes along and helps the child, I like that. I have a desire to see that child taken care of. Okay. The vast majority of us will have that sense. And just out of curiosity, how many of you, and I've asked you this question before, you've seen on TV the advertisement of, if you donate money, we'll help save the starving kid that's sitting here beside this guy in this dirty street. How many of you have seen an advertisement like that? How many of you have ever turned the channel, changed the channel, so you didn't have to worry about it? You can raise your hands. How many of you called and donated money? Oh, look at you guys go. Yeah, no one's called and donated money. But if you were to have called and donated money, so here's my question. If you were to have called and donated money to help the starving kids in Bangladesh or someplace, how many of you would do so because you want to feel good about the kids being taken care of. You have a desire to see the kids taken care of because you have feelings for the kids. How many of you would that be your motive? If you were to give money, and this would be probably very different in this class because I think it may go generally upon male-female lines. How many of you, if you were to donate money, would do so simply because, not because you feel anything necessarily for the kids, but because it's the right thing to do and you know it is? How many of you would find that that would be your motivation? Oh, wow. Okay, the majority of you. This would be the case for first period as well. And frankly, that's the case for me as well. My wife and I, we have a kid through World Vision that we've sponsor. And yeah, I don't really feel anything about it, but I know it's the right thing to do. And so I do it, right? And so there, in other words, there can be lots of motives. It's not just selfishness. There's lots of other motives that you can do. You can do it because you want to do the right thing. You have a desire to do your part as a member of humanity. You could want to do something because you actually care for the welfare of another person. There's a whole bunch of different motives that we can have. And so psychological egoism doesn't work particularly well. Okay, guys, that's what I have for you today. Once again, read the second half of Rachel's argument for this coming Thursday. We don't have school on Wednesday. It's Veterans Day or Armistice Day. So have the second half of the article read, and there'll be a one-question quiz and a discussion to follow. If I'm here, and if not, then Mrs. Ness will have something else for you. Okay, guys, it's been a pleasure. We'll see you later.
Bye.